for me, the important message to get across is no matter what age or stage you're in, balance is the place that you need to start off from, okay? And balance means eating from all the food groups, eating good quality food from all the food groups. So that's, your vegetables and your fruit, your whole grain carbohydrates, your lean protein with some omega-3 sources in there, and healthy fats. So that's going to be standard. Absolutely, what you put on your plate is powerful. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to get it right 100% all the time. Absolutely not. But this is about a pattern of eating. So, in my book, I talk about eating healthy in this balanced way that we've talked about 80% of the time. And actually 20% of the time, eating whatever you want to eat, and it doesn't need to be balanced. That might be cake for breakfast, or it might be a burger on a Friday, no problem. But the rest of the time, trying to get that balance in.
And get back to basics when it comes to women's health. Through expert insights and powerful personal stories, we help you tune in to what really matters. Your body, your well-being, your life. No one-size-fits-all advice, just real conversations to help you understand your health on your own terms. But before we dive in, I have a quick favour to ask. Please hit subscribe and join the 51% community on our website. It's free and it helps us grow, reach more women and create events that really speak to the health and wealth challenges we all face. And finally, just so you know, everything shared on this podcast is for information only. It's not medical or financial advice, and always speak to a qualified expert for support. Linia, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have you on again. I'm really excited about this conversation because I want to dive a little bit deeper in the nutrition world with you. Can you please introduce yourself and talk a bit about your journey from what you're doing and what you're doing next? That'll be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me again, and fantastic to be back. So I wear a number of different hats. I'm a women's health dietitian. I work in performance nutrition, and I also work as a public health researcher. And the last time I had a conversation with you, it was ahead of my launch of my best-selling book, which is called Food for Menopause. So sure, I'm just passionate about getting women to have good nutrition advice that is evidence-informed, that is empowering, and that is practical.
That's fantastic. And that's the key, evidence-informed. Now, the first question I want to ask you is, dietitian versus nutritionist. What is the difference? And really, there are a lot of people out there where there's, they're dietitians or nutritionists, and then you get things like nutritionist coach, and I don't know, there's all sorts of things out there. So can you just tell me what the difference is, and how can you tell that person is qualified? Because I think qualifications are really important when you're seeking a dietitian and a nutritionist.
Yeah, fantastic question. And, it's wild out there in the nutrition world. And like you rightly said, sure, qualifications matter. So very often people don't know that actually dietitians are the only nutrition professional that are legally protected. So they have a university degree, they're clinically trained, and they're legally regulated because they have to be registered with the Health Professionals Council. So that means that they have a code of conduct to comply with. So unfortunately, that means that we also can't go on Instagram and say ridiculous things about nutrition because we are responsible for the things that we kind of say. Nutritionist, on the other hand, isn't a protected title. So whilst you can have many nutritionists that are brilliantly trained and so good at their jobs, you can also have people that have done a weekend course or something online that they bought with a discount code, and so that's the difficulty is that a nutritionist can be somebody who's super informed, and yet also can be somebody who knows a little bit of information. And we know sometimes that actually knowing a little bit of information, whilst it's good, is also limiting because there's still gaps in terms of how you apply that information. So how do you spot credible professionals, which is what your question asked? Well, you were looking for HCPC registered dietitians. Then you're looking for AFN, so Association for Nutrition, registered nutritionist. because they are going to be kind of evidence-based. They're going to be following evidence-based guidance, and they're also hopefully going to be able to give you advice that is kind of transparent and reliable. And in general, I mean, there's other nutrition professionals, like you're saying, nutrition coaches, who are still giving solid advice. But I would say, if any advice seems super extreme, really restrictive, maybe sales driven, maybe that's a red flag. Good nutrition advice for me should be empowering. And, nowadays, everything is, I see on Instagram, it's kind of like, a study showed. Well, unfortunately, in the science world, you can probably find a study to back whatever argument you have. And so it's not just about saying, well, it's a study is backed by a study. It's actually trying to think broader to what is the quality of that study, and how can we be critical about some of the information that we receive, rather than just taking everything at face value.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I mean, it takes a lot of time. It's like when you go into the supermarket, right? It takes time to kind of look through the ingredients, just to kind of give yourself a sense check and make sure you're not getting something that's got lots of things that aren't good for you in it. And I think if you take the same approach when you're kind of approaching a healthcare professional or a nutritionist or a dietitian, giving advice on nutrition and food you should and shouldn't eat. And like you said, based on a study. Now, what is that study? Where has that study come from? There's lots of things in that. And then perhaps you could even question and ask them, I'm not sure I understand. What does this mean for me? I mean, there's so many things. It takes a bit of time, but I think it is definitely worth it. At the end of the day, we're thinking about your health, your body, and your needs, and it is about you, not what works for everyone else. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I would just add there, Shreya, I think you said something really important. What works for you as an individual? In this world where we're just surrounded by information, and information that is external, I always encourage my clients and the wonderful women that I work with to actually look inward and to start really being intuitive about what works for them as an individual. Because, the best nutrition advice you can follow is personalized, and it's what works for you with your genetics, with your makeup, with your world, in your world. And so it's also leaning in and not necessarily just listening to what everybody else is doing and following the latest trend.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of leads on to my next question. Women's bodies change, okay?
Yeah.
And that's for most people, to be honest, as we age, right? What your body needs when you're a baby, to when you're a teen, to, when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, things change. Now, especially during perimenopause and menopause, right? So this one size fits all approach definitely can't work, because if you're having a certain food type in your, in your teens, you may not necessarily have that in your 40s, for example. But can you kind of elaborate on how these changes affect you, and what kind of food groups kind of should we be thinking about, especially when women start approaching their 30s and 40s?
Well, I think that for me, the important message to get across is, no matter what age or stage you're in, balance is the place that you need to start off from, okay? And balance means eating from all the food groups, eating good quality food from all the food groups. So that's, your vegetables and your fruit, your whole grain carbohydrates, your lean protein with some omega-3 sources in there, and healthy fats. So that's going to be standard. Now, the proportions of perhaps how those foods evolve over time changes, because as we get older, so as we're moving from our 30s into our 40s, and we're going into what we call the perimenopause transition, we have metabolic changes that happen as a result of the fluctuating hormones. So we have two big sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And the thing with perimenopause is you can't do a blood test to diagnose that you're in perimenopause. You kind of check in and notice what your symptoms are. But also what we see is that the flux of estrogen and progesterone from one day to the next day means that a lot of things are shifting in the way that our bodies work. So one of the ways is that the way that we manage carbohydrates is different. So our bodies become a little bit more sensitive to the fact that if we eat big plates of pasta, we process them slightly different. Our blood sugar levels rise a little bit higher, and we're more likely to store some of that carbohydrate as fat. And that's because the lack of estrogen has an impact on the hormone insulin. So now that does not mean, ladies, that you cut carbohydrates out your diet. In fact, the perimenopause is all about nourishing your body. But it does mean that you focus on the type of carbohydrates that you're eating. So you're focusing more on your whole grains and your whole food and less on things like white rice or white bread or your kind of, classic junk food like your crisps and biscuits. And then also we know that the timing of when we eat seems to matter, particularly in the perimenopause transition. So if we have these carbohydrate-rich foods earlier in the day, our body just responds better to it. Whereas perhaps in our 20s or 30s, we could have had a nice pasta and sausage bake in the evening, no problem. But perhaps in your perimenopause transition, if you're perhaps struggling with weight, or you perhaps have gone and had some blood tests and you're finding out that your numbers in terms of your glucose control is not as good, then perhaps that pasta bake needs to be brought as leftovers for lunch, and dinner needs to be more based on protein and your vegetables, for example.
So I really want to go into, fiber, protein, and carbs, because I feel like, we all know that ideally we should be having a balanced plate.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of protein, how much protein should we be eating, and what does that actually look like on a plate for, someone that eats meat and someone that doesn't eat meat, for example? Because, and what kinds of foods as well, because there's all this narrative around if you're this weight, you should be having this much protein, and that may be true, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. But in terms of on a daily basis, I have a set amount of time that I can cook. Now, ideally, what should be on that plate in terms of fiber as well? I feel like there's so much information out there on fiber. You need to have fiber. It's so important. And we're lacking in fiber, really, from what I can see. But how do I know I'm having enough fiber as well?
Yeah, brilliant question. Okay, so let's break it down. Let's maybe talk about protein first. And protein is an important nutrient to get right, particularly in your perimenopause years, because it ticks a number of different boxes. Your muscles are made of protein. And your muscles are very important because as you get older, muscle is almost like your metabolic engine. It burns more calories at rest. And the more muscle you have, the better for your health overall. But also as you age, the better it's going to be in terms of functional capacity. Will you be able to walk up the stairs? Will you be able to get off the toilet seat yourself? I know we don't tend to think about the future, but I've had an elderly mum who was not able to do that. And I know how much that has really made me think about how I choose to be an active partner in determining how I age.
Yeah.
But protein also helps you feel fuller for longer. And it also is a building block for your hormones. And it's also fantastic for, it's a building block also for your immune cells, for example. So it ticks, and good for your bones. So it ticks a number of different boxes. So we need to make sure we're getting enough. What is enough? So as a dietitian, the recommendations are calculated based on your body weight. Okay. So the recommended daily intake, the government guidelines are that we need to consume 0.75 or 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. Now, there's a lot of debate in the nutrition world that actually that number was perhaps an underestimate of what people need to consume. And it's more around preventing malnutrition. Whereas being a performance nutritionist, I'm about Thrive Zone, not just about preventing something. So we're talking now about a new method of measuring protein requirements called your amino acid oxidation method. And that shows that actually requirements should probably be starting about 1 gram per kilogram body weight. So if you are weighing 60 kilograms, that will be 60 grams of protein that you need to consume. Now, protein-rich foods are things like your, well, maybe you can help me here. What do you think protein-rich foods are?
For me, I feel like eggs, cottage cheese.
Yeah.
And cheese in general, I guess, hard cheese, maybe.
Okay.
Legumes, beans, things like chickpeas, kidney beans, mung dal. I mean,
Okay.
I could list out a whole lot of Indian kind of
Well,
foods that I eat, but
okay.
um, yeah, I think that would, and then obviously, meat, red meat or chicken, fish, things like that.
Okay. Well, fantastic, Shreya. You've given me a whole range of different foods contain protein. And to be honest, every single food probably contains protein. Even broccoli contains protein.
Mm.
But if I'm going to be smart as a perimenopausal woman and I'm going to say I need to eat 60 grams of protein a day, the first thing I need to get right is distributing that protein evenly throughout my day. Because we almost have this in our bodies, an amino acid pool. And you almost want your amino acid pool, which is basically the building blocks of that protein, to always have something in it. So your body can always draw from that pool. So there's no point going low protein the whole day and then eating a whole Nando's chicken in the evening. That's just not the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So I want to spread my protein intake. So it could be if I'm eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, my 60 grams, I've got 20 grams at each meal. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mentioned that broccoli had protein, but maybe 100 grams of broccoli has 1 gram of protein. So to get 20 grams of protein, I would need to eat 2 kilograms of broccoli. Is that practical? No.
No.
So we go to the protein foods that are higher in proteins. And like you rightly mentioned, that's any animal products, or if you're vegetarian, beans and pulses, which also have some carbohydrates. So beans and pulses are nature's mixed meal. They've got half protein, half carbohydrate. And then soy-based foods have protein as well. So without weighing stuff, what does that look like? And I would probably say you want it to be like a quarter of your plate. So a standard dinner plate, you want it to be a quarter of your plate. Or actually, if you're using your hand as a measure, you want it to be the size of your palm, the thickness of your palm. If it's anything like red meat, oily fish, or chicken. If it's white fish, it can be slightly bigger. And beans and pulses, exactly the same concept. So that would be the way of getting 20 to 25 grams of protein in every meal without even having to worry about weighing it. So a fistful, for example.
Mm.
That's the amount of protein you're going to be wanting to get from one meal to the next meal. Okay? Obviously, that's the lower end of the recommendations. We know as you become more active that those recommendations can increase. And so that actually you can go from 1.2 to 1.6. How do you know for you as an individual you got the right number? So in my clinical practice, I measure a number of different things.
Yeah.
I see what's happening to your muscle mass over time. I see how you're feeling. Are you feeling like your appetite is under check? Do you have sugar cravings? Do you feel satisfied after a meal? And if you're ticking all those boxes, then perhaps for you the 1 gram is perfect. If not, then maybe we need to incrementally go up. I tend to find, Shreya, that in the nutrition world, it's black and white thinking. It's kind of like protein is good, so all I'm going to focus on is protein. And then you miss the other nutrients in there. So more is never better. It's about finding that sweet spot. But I would say a good place to begin is a quarter of your plate, fistful.
Mm. That's really useful because I feel like I need more protein in my head, and then there's a lot of narrative around protein powders as well. And I don't know what your thoughts are on protein powders, to be honest, because are they useful, and why would you even have a protein powder? Because in my mind, I would say food first. Which is what a lot of nutritionists or dietitians, I suppose, would say, unless there's a huge lack of protein for whatever reason. Some people, I guess, with illnesses and, there's different reasons for different, why people take a protein supplement.
Yeah, and I think, I'm a dietitian, so obviously food first. And the reason for that is that, when you're eating a chicken breast or when you're eating cottage cheese, you don't just get protein. You get the food with loads of other micronutrients and lots of things called zoonutrients that affect the bioavailability and the absorption of those nutrients, okay? And when you get a protein powder, you're just isolating the protein. But I have to be realistic. So it's food first, but not necessarily food always. Mm. So there is a place for protein powders. And in my clinical practice, I tend to find that the reasons people use protein powders are probably for convenience. And it's just a way of getting protein in quickly. But I would always be kind of saying, I want that to be the exception versus the rule. Or perhaps if you are using a protein powder as part of a smoothie, I want whole foods in there. So I still want you to be adding your blueberries and your kefir and your nuts. So you're still getting, for me, what is more kind of a kind of balanced meal, as it were.
Yeah.
So again, quality matters when you're looking at protein, and you want to be going. If you're having protein occasionally, then no problem what type of protein you choose. You can have your double chocolate chip flavored proteins, but if you're having it regularly, then perhaps you want to be going more for something that is unflavored, because it comes with less artificial sweeteners and less kind of additives in there as well.
Yeah, I guess it's an individual thing, right? The other question I want to ask, actually, with protein, does it depend on, we talk about your body weight, right? So around 1 kg per
1
kilo.
gram.
1 gram, God, 1 kg. 1 gram per 1 kg of body weight. Now, does it differ according to your ethnic background? Like as a South Asian? No? Okay.
It doesn't differ. We don't have the data. In fact, this is where, there's massive gaps in the data, right? Because a lot of this research is done on white college males who tend to be American. And so we don't have ethnic specific data to say, these are the guidelines. And so I'm always, talking about the fact that as brown and black people, we need to put our hand up more whenever there's research being done, because it just means that we have data to collect. But we do know, and this is really interesting, because there's a study which is from the States, which looks at what happens of people of different ethnicities as they go through the menopause transition. And so it's in America, so it looks at white women, Asian women, so kind of Japanese and kind of Indian ethnicity, and then black women, so kind of Caribbean women. And we see that as we go through perimenopause transition, so women gain weight. We don't know whether women gain weight because of menopause or whether it's just natural aging. Or perhaps all the symptoms they feel, not sleeping, feeling fatigued, leads them to health behaviors that then exacerbate the weight gain versus the hormones, okay? But we know that they gain weight. But what's more important is the weight they gain is primarily fat and not muscle. And the two ethnicities that seem to be worse off is your Asian women, and they have higher visceral fat around the middle, and not as much muscle mass, and your black women. And is that because of the lifestyle factors that tends to come with those ethnicities? So the fact that perhaps as black or brown women, we're not necessarily as active in terms of the gym. And so we don't have a good kind of muscle mass to begin with. And then those hormonal changes during the menopause just exacerbate conditions. So I would then be saying, if you are of a different ethnicity, I'll be more focusing on what's your body composition. How much muscle mass do you have? And actually for me to increase muscle mass, protein is important. But, I'm a dietitian, and for me to say this, it shows you how important it is. Before you eat enough protein, you have to have the stimulus. And so that means doing weight training or resistance training. So the stimulus creates then the environment that the nutrition, the protein, then can kind of enhance.
Okay. Wow, that makes it a lot clearer, because I guess people have this misconception of, I'm just going to eat protein and it's going to...
Well, in a one way, it will protect your muscle mass, but it's not going to enhance it. We know that you need this. So it's almost like the stimulus, the exercise, and it doesn't need to be lifting heavy weights. It just needs to be progressive resistance movement. That can be your own body weight. That can be a rubber elastic bands, or it can be weights. That's the cake, the base of the cake. The protein is the icing.
Right.
And people don't often think of it like that.
Yeah, they don't. Well, I certainly did, that's for sure. So what about fiber? Because this is a big one. I have no idea, and I don't think many people do, how much fiber should I be having, and what does that even look like? Because the narratives I hear is that we, as a nation, we are not, well, probably even worldwide, we are not consuming enough fiber.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what does that even look like on a plate?
Well, that is 100% true. So in the National Nutrition Survey that's been done, I've just done every year, In the UK, 96% of us are not hitting our fibre recommendations. So only 4% of people are eating the recommended 30 grams of fibre a day. So how much should you be eating? 30 grams a day as your minimum. There's some research coming out from mainland Europe, which actually shows that actually going to 35 or even 40 might be more beneficial.
Is that for any body weight? Sorry.
Yeah, it's standard.
That's just a standard for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, children?
No, so children is obviously slightly less because of the fact that they're younger. So this is adults. So from 19 years old to kind of 65, you should be on this. Okay. So the average intake is about 19 grams a day. So we have 20 grams a deficit that we're not necessarily eating. Why is that important? Well, fiber, when I was at university 20 years ago, fiber was good for your digestive health, it helped prevent constipation. There's different types of fiber. There's soluble fiber, which you find in oats or stuff that looks a little bit slimy. So your blueberries, your mushrooms, your bananas, your lentils. And that soluble fiber also helps excrete cholesterol. So it's really good for heart health as well. That's what I learned. But in the last 10 years, we found that the role of fiber is huge, is far exceeding just the kind of 4 roles that I stated. And that's because we have this world of a bacteria that lives in our intestine called your microbiome. And your microbiome are involved not just in helping you digest and extract nutrients from what you eat, but linked to absolutely everything from hormonal control, weight management, your mood, immune system, disease risk, you name it. And just those bacteria are live organisms, just like you like to eat, they like to eat. And you almost think about it as that if your intestine is like a pantry, a house with a pantry, and there's not enough fiber, which is their favorite food, what do they start doing? They start eating almost the wallpaper of that pantry, which is your lining of your intestine. And that's not a good thing because it leads over time to colloquially what is known as having slightly leaky gut. And that means that substances that shouldn't be traveling from your gut and through different parts of the body start doing that. And that obviously leads to things like inflammation. We know in the perimenopause transition, we already have higher markers of inflammation. So an inflammation exacerbates every symptom from brain fog to joint pain to irritable bowel syndrome to your risk of chronic diseases. So, when I talk about it in my book, I talk about the fact that the pillars of well-being are eating to manage inflammation, but eating to nourish your gut bacteria as well. So if we come back to your question, why do we need to eat more fiber? Ultimately, we need to eat more fiber to ensure that we're nourishing our gut bacteria. That's why, because they have such a kind of a profound role in our health and well-being.
That explains it. I know your book explains a hell of a lot because I've read it from start to finish and even done a lot of the recipes. But like in terms of fiber, then what kind of food is that fiber and what does it look like on your plate? Because that is something that I have no idea about.
Well, I'm going to turn the question back at you because this is what I tend to find most people say to me, well, Linia, I'm eating lots of fiber. I'm eating salad for lunch. I'm eating lots of vegetables at dinner. And so fiber is found in plant-based foods, okay? And so most plant-based foods will have some element of fiber. But the ones that make the biggest bang for your buck in terms of that, getting you to your 30-gram mark, is actually going to be your whole grains and your beans and lentils. So if I had 100 grams of whole grains like quinoa or brown rice or red rice or oats, that would have around 6 to 7 grams of fiber. If I had 100 grams of lentils or kidney beans, that would have more or less the same amount of fiber, a little bit less. If I had 100 grams of fruit and vegetables, that would only have 3 or 4 grams.
Wow.
So what am I going to be focusing on if I want to hit my 30 gram mark? I want to be focusing on my whole grains, my beans and lentils, and I didn't mention one, which is nuts and seeds. So nuts and seeds have huge amounts of protein, like from 10 to 20 grams. But obviously nuts and seeds come with lots of fat, which is calorific. So this is not your cue to eat a whole bag of cashews, because I want you to add nuts and seeds to everything you're eating, but still keep the portion to 30 grams, 20 to 30 gram portions at a go.
That still doesn't feel like, you said 30 grams ideally. ideally we should be having, that still doesn't feel like 30 grams. Like when I look on my plate, I feel like, okay, my plate is vegetarian.
Okay.
I'm not vegetarian, but we at home, it's all vegetarian, and it's typically Indian food,
Okay.
at least 4 times a week. Now, the lentils and then the vegetables are there, but then that's
Where are
still,
your whole grains? Where are your whole grains? So I would say, well, there we go. So if you're eating at lunch, I'd say, what are you doing at breakfast? I mean, what are you doing at breakfast normally?
breakfast, I guess. Yeah, nuts,
Okay.
almonds, walnuts, and cashews, and some pistachios.
Okay.
That's
So
my
Shri, I mean, this is me putting you on the spot. If I go back to the very first thing I talked about, that's really important to get balance.
yeah.
How strong are we starting off with just nuts for breakfast?
Yeah, not good. Not good at all. Yeah.
And almost, I would almost be saying, and maybe if you want to do some intermittent fasting as part of your eating pattern, that obviously puts pressure. It's put pressure on the rest of your eating patterns for protein and fiber. And so if we just go back to basics, drop all these other, fads and just say, let's focus on getting enough fiber. I would say, I almost want you to be getting between 8 to 10 grams at breakfast. So 10 grams before 10 a.m. And so that means my breakfast is either going to be seeded bread with some, eggs, maybe with some avocado and seeds, or could put some beans on there. Or if I have porridge, I might mix up my oat porridge with some quinoa to get more protein in there. And then obviously porridge is a bit low in protein. So I would be either adding some little ground almonds. Obviously the quinoa gives me a little bit more protein. Or I'll be topping it up with a little bit of a Greek yogurt. Or hemp seeds, for me, are my favorite protein friend because 1 tablespoon of hemp seeds has about 7 grams of protein.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So just small changes you can make get you to that number. And then lunchtime, I'm saying, if you've got some dal, even if you've got some chapati, make sure it's whole wheat flour, and then add some seeds on top of your dal, or add some seeds into your chapati. And then if you're looking at your vegetables, rather than doing salad, go for your heavier vegetables. Things like your broccoli, your carrots, some cabbages. Those are going to be much better choices. Okra, my favorite. And that's what I cooked up yesterday.
Yeah.
High fiber,
Yeah.
rich in folate, versus going maybe for things like your salad vegetables, which is lower in fiber. Peas are a fantastic source of fiber as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it's thinking about the whole thing because, I guess I don't, it's not just the nuts. I'll have nuts and then a banana and coffee, but then why would I just do that? I can have I used to do a nice yogurt bowl with
overnight oats or something like that, where you put some chia seeds in and some hemp seeds, just maybe making it a bit more balanced. And I'll put my hand up, I'm sure, because my schedule. I live between Milan and London. I travel a lot. When I'm at home, of course I can hit my fiber intake. When I'm on the go, it's super hard. So I do lean into, for example, I'm head nutritionist at Indie Supplements, and I love their products. So they're whole food products. And in a sachet of Indie that I can kind of shake up when I'm on the go, I get 7 grams of fiber. So that's the way that I practically lean into a little bit more fiber when I'm on the go, because I put my hand up and say, even as a dietitian, it's hard to get when you are not necessarily in control of what you're eating all the time.
Yeah, you can't, at the end of the day, this isn't about being perfect every single day. And that is a really unrealistic thing, especially these days where, women do go out to work and they are, their schedules are packed, and some women have caring responsibilities, whether that's children or their parents, so it's very difficult to make sure you're getting, your protein, your carbs, your fiber, exactly how you should be getting every single day. And sometimes you may need to turn into something that you've just mentioned, indie supplements,
indie body. So it's
Indie
a kind
body,
of food-based supplement that is fiber-based, because I suppose the whole ethos of what we're seeing in indies, we try and fill the gaps that we see on a population level, and fiber being one big gap, and also not eating enough plants being another. So it's just basically a powder supplement that you can add. But if I just go back, and I would say start small. So something like go and buy, big bags of nuts and seeds and mix them up yourself at home. Put them onto your kitchen counter. And even just that is a start of getting the mix of different. I have one which is a seed one, and I have one which is a nut one. It's just a fantastic way of me elevating the nutrition of my meals in an easy way. So even on my busiest of days, even if I'm just grabbing a yogurt, for example, adding in some of those nuts and seeds already takes it up a level. It gives me a little bit more protein, my omega-3 and my fiber as well.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And what you said before as well, it's kind of like, yep, tick, I've done my, 30 grams of, or whatever grams of whatever
10
it is.
grams.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the morning, and that's that. It doesn't, I guess it doesn't work if you are consuming all your protein intake in the morning, as an example, or all your fiber intake in the
Brilliant.
afternoon.
I'm so glad that you raised that, because absolutely. So, like protein, fiber is best spread out throughout the day. And and also it's also important to remember with fiber, slow and steady is better than a sprint. So, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, oh my goodness, the dietitian on that 51% told me that I need to eat more fiber. I don't want you to go out and then suddenly increase your fiber intake, because you'll find that your stomach might feel really bloated, if you go too quickly. So slowly is the way, and make sure that you're hydrated with it, because fiber also needs water for it to kind of have the optimum benefits. So as you increase your fiber intake, increase your water intake, and slowly does it.
Would you say that what you eat, the food you eat, the real food that you eat, has a direct correlation to your perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms, in terms of eating well, eating good food, and making sure it is balanced? It is that balanced plate of, good fiber, good protein, good carbohydrates, etc., compared to obviously having a bad diet. And I don't mean diet as in going on a diet, I mean like food.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we know that not drinking enough water, perhaps eating lots of refined carbohydrates like your, white flour products, or lots of sugar, for example, added sugar, that affects your blood sugar control. And blood sugar controls that are kind of out of whack and almost following that roller coaster ride style have an impact on how you feel. You're going to feel more tired. You're going to feel more irritable. You will have more brain fog. You're going to have more inflammation. Your weight is going to increase. And then that has a knock-on impact on you feeling more inflamed. Feeling inflamed exacerbates your symptoms. And that in the long term, you're not going to, also your risk of chronic diseases is going to be affected. So absolutely what you put on your plate is powerful. Now, sure, this doesn't mean that you need to get it right 100% all the time. Absolutely not. But this is about a pattern of eating. So, in my book, I talk about eating healthy in this balanced way that we've talked about 80% of the time. And actually 20% of the time eating whatever you want to eat, and it doesn't need to be balanced. That might be cake for breakfast, or it might be a burger on a Friday, no problem. But the rest of the time trying to get that balance in there.
Yeah, because I feel like as soon as women hit perimenopause, I'll take, myself as an example, okay? I get all these symptoms, whether it's sleep issues, brain fog, and then, I don't know. There's so many. Aching is another one. That's another big one. And I feel like for me, if I haven't eaten well and slept well, and I guess incorporated some movement, those symptoms are get worse.
Yeah.
And then I start maybe leaning on to I'll just take an ibuprofen. I'll just take this, or I'll just take that,
Yeah. And I think, hormones take cues from their environment. And what nutrition does, and what being active does, what sleeping enough does, and managing your well-being is creates that environment that can either be a formidable ally to helping you manage your symptoms, or perhaps exacerbating what you're feeling.
How would you, let's face it, a lot of people are busy, okay?
Yeah.
We are in an environment now where it just busy seems to be the word. I don't know anyone that's not used the word, oh, I'm not busy, I've got all the time in the
Mm.
world. Most people say, oh, I'm so busy, I've got this and I've got this. Now, for someone that is that busy, how would you what advice would you give them
Yeah.
to start off even with the basics? Because a lot of people start leaning onto going to the supermarket. And let's face it, like for me personally, my view of the supermarket is now, like I feel like when I walk into the supermarket, like 80% of the stuff in there is not good for you. Is not
Yeah.
good, and then unless you're just in the vegetable aisle and the fruit aisle, most of it is just not good for you. So how, instead of leaning on that ultra processed ready meal, which it's fine now and again, I mean, there's if you have to, you have to, right? But what are the kind of quick and easy ways to get started on this?
Yeah, I think you raised an important point, and the conversation around processed foods and ultra processed foods is huge. And I think it's important to remember that processed and ultra processed foods exist on a spectrum, so they're not all harmful. But the research does show that diets that are high in ultra processed foods, so that's like packaged snacks, your biscuits, your sweets, your junk food, the typical junk food, that does lead to inflammation, poor metabolic health and all that jazz. But let's also be realistic, and I think before we were recording this podcast, I kind of said to you, your lived experience matters just as much as science. And so sometimes I think that we can people can almost feel so overwhelmed because eating this perfectly whole food diet and making their own energy balls every day is what they're pressured to do, but that's unrealistic.
But that's what you see on Instagram, right? As
That's
well.
what you see on Instagram, and that's so unrealistic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm a huge fan, Shreya, of saying small changes done consistently have that cumulative impact that makes the difference that you want. And I work with a lot of high performing individuals. And if I say, the thing that I always notice in them is they don't do anything super fancy. They do the basic stuff consistently. So in this conversation that we've been having, we've talked about so many different things. And as you're listening, if there's been one thing that has resonated a little bit more with you or made you think, oh my goodness, that's my weak link, either or, perhaps you use that one thing as the facilitator for saying that's the thing that I need to focus on. So just pick the one thing, and it could be maybe for you more fiber. So it could be, if we then talk more fiber, it might be I'm going to focus on my breakfast. So no, that's all I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on the one nutrient and the one meal. Get that right. Do that consistently for a little bit. Don't worry about everything else. When you've got that one nailed, move on to the next thing. And again, this goes broader. There's nutrition is linked with all the other wellness pillars. So some of us tend to be better at nutrition and some of us worse at physical activity. Some of us sleep is because we're scrolling too much on Instagram. Sleep is our weak link.
Yeah.
So think about your health holistically. And for you and your journey, think about, okay, of the pillars, which is the one that I need to work on? Where do I need to put my focus on? And just start small, and pillar by pillar, action by action, those small changes will have that cumulative impact that will make you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Thanks so much for saying that, because I think a lot of people, we're consumed by so much information. That's one thing, right? Especially, when you start looking at social media, everyone seems to be making the perfect meal all the time.
Oh my goodness.
And then you're kind of like, oh my God, look at that. When can I even do that?
How
do
are they
do
doing it?
that? How is anyone doing anything on Instagram, I suppose? But, behind that, there are people with, I guess, lives that are chaotic, busy, crazy, but people don't really see that. And I think when you start just understanding and thinking, okay, they look perfect here, or that looks perfect, but behind the scenes it might be different. You need to have that at the back of your mind, just for your own psychological safety, I guess, as well, right? To understand
100%.
that everyone has, it's almost like leading double lives or whatever. And then just tuning into your body and what you need, and what, you know, what your environment is, what your situation is, how much money. I mean, I feel like good quality food costs so much these days. It's
Yeah.
almost like fruit, nuts costs more than a ready meal. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, no, totally. And so I would say two things there. The focus of needs to be stay in your own lane and work at your own pace, because you have your own lived experience and story, and
Yeah.
very similarly to how you have that individual fingerprint, finding the solutions in you for your toolkit is exactly like that. And so
Yeah.
you're never going to find the solutions by looking at other people and how they're doing it, because that's not your lane. So stick to your lane. And then also in terms of cost, I totally agree. And that's just another barrier, right? But small things like convenience foods, the more convenient something is, the higher the price tag is going to come with. And so I would almost be kind of saying, even for example, with supplementation, stick with the basics. There's so much marketing. It's an unregulated field. The marketing is wild, some of the claims that they make. And I feel so bad for the general public, because they are almost being sold and told promises that actually just don't exist. And
Yeah.
so what I would say is that take a step back and make sure that you're not just buying something because it's the latest trend. Go back to the basics, get your vitamin D and your omega-3. Start with that. Don't worry about all the other supplements yet. And then over time, be very selective with which ones you buy and take, that will give you the return on investment that you need. If, for example, fiber is the gap, perhaps then you need something that is more, that's going to hit that gap. Or perhaps if protein is, look at different ways that you can get that protein done easier, more accessible in your diet.
That's a great way to approach it, because, like you said, the supplement industry is wild. It's kind of, there. And I feel like, I get drawn into it myself. I feel, oh, I feel this, maybe I take that supplement and that'll be better. But then it's a quick fix, I guess.
Yeah.
But then, quick question on the supplements, to be honest. How do you know you need that supplement? Whether it's, a lot of people say magnesium for sleep, vitamin D, obviously, where a lot of people are deficient in that, taking omega-3 tablets, taking, there's all sorts out there. I can't even name half of them.
Yeah, no, totally. Obviously, within my clinical practice, I do testing. So I don't supplement unless I know somebody needs it, because then I'm very targeted with my supplementation. So if there's a deficiency, we need to rectify them. Then we find out what their maintenance dose is. But obviously, not everybody has the luxury of doing that. But I would say numbers that I would like you to know, ladies, is know your vitamin D numbers. Go to your GP, get that done, or buy a test on Amazon or online that is quite accessible and easy. So that for me is probably the biggest one. Then the other supplements, I'll probably be saying, I wouldn't necessarily be recommending you just kind of supplement particularly minerals in isolation. So that's where perhaps a multivitamin might be better, because you're getting all the multivitamins in lower doses. So your risk of kind of doing damage is going to be limited. But then again, we know that the absorption of some of those multivitamins is isolated and not ideal. So that's why obviously, something like a food-based supplement is going to be a better way of doing it, because you're going to get maximum nutrients and the fiber at the same time. So, I would, again, and then that's probably why people are more leaning into something like a greens powder. But we know that the evidence around green powders is also not great, and they taste disgusting and they cost the earth. So again, find something that works for you that you actually enjoy, because you're more likely to be able to do it.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I think, with the supplement industry, I think it's wild, and I think a lot of people fall prey to that, and they start taking supplements. And you're right, go to your GP, and if you can't afford a test privately to go through all the intricacies of your blood test, you can, your GP can do a lot of these blood tests and tell you, yes, you are, slightly deficient in vitamin D or iron or, the B12 or whatever.
Exactly.
And then you can take, but is there harm in, even if you're not deficient through your GP's blood test, is there harm in then saying, oh, I'm still going to take all these vitamins?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is if you're taking high dose or for a long period of time. So the issue is the dosage, and the issue is also is how long you're doing it. So I guess, the body works in a beautiful balance and a beautiful equilibrium. If you just throw a lot of copper or zinc at it, and you're not throwing the other nutrients, then your body has to compensate in some way or form.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I'll kind of just say, if you want to keep it safe, you want to go lower dose, more multiple complexes versus, unless you're working with a clinician to give you that specific advice.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Linia, thank you so much for your insights and helping to demystify a lot of information that's out there. It's been great to have you on again, and I look forward to collaborating with you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.